Tonight, we have the pleasure of hosting Vince Burruano, an accomplished sales leader, consultant, and author with nearly 35 years of experience in sales and business development. Vince has led teams at notable companies like JK Moving Services and Rico USA, to name a few, empowering professionals to unlock their potential and achieve outstanding growth. He is also the author of insightful books, including A Daily Dose of Sales Wisdom. Vince is passionate about coaching, leadership development, and creating high-impact strategies for success. Let's welcome Vince Burruano to the show. Woohoo!
Well, thank you so much, Cynthia. It's an honor to be on your program here this evening. And thank you for such a warm introduction. Appreciate it.
And hello, Jake. He's our first one on. Woohoo! We'll tell you about that. Hang out, Jake. So you're not going to believe this, but Vince Burruano really was my mentor and manager for a good part of my career many decades ago. And my company had just been bought by another company. And I was a little out of sorts because what I was selling, I was no longer selling. I had a whole brand, a new everything. And Vince always made sure that his people were well trained, versed, and ready to go. Preparation, preparation, preparation. So we had this challenge to practice our skills. And he has set up like every half hour throughout the day, like 2 days to get the whole team in. Yeah. And you had to give your presentation and you had to do a demo and you had to like do the whole thing from start to finish, like you never met him before. Well, I stayed there till like 1 o'clock in the morning, making sure all my stuff was ready. And I was first. And I got there, I think the first one was at 7:30 or 8 o'clock. And I got there like an hour early. And someone had come in and moved all my stuff. You know, you have to regroup. And I got up there and I sucked. I couldn't do it. I just was like, ah. And he was very kind and compassionate. And he said to me, Cynthia, have you ever heard of Jeffrey Gitomer? And I was like, never heard of him. And he goes, well, you should. Go pick up a book or two and we'll do this again next week. So on my way home from work, you know, I went to that bookstore that was in Bethesda, Barnes & Noble, the great big one on the round. And I went and I bought every one of Jeffrey Gitomer's books. And Vince Burruano gave Jeffrey Gitomer a very good customer that day, because not only did I buy every book, I also then started to attend the seminars. And that is how a man inspires someone to raise up and be better. And that's just like a small little example, because Vince Burruano, you are amazing. You are a kind leader. You've always helped us and many other people. And so I want to know what inspired you to do a career in sales leadership.
Well, that's a great question. I think like a lot of people growing up, you try to find your way. So when I was growing up, I had gone off to college like a lot of people with grand ambitions. And my grand ambition was to go and graduate college and maybe go on to law school and be an attorney and practice law, be a trial lawyer. You know, I like the idea of being on a stage, you know, and it's very competitive, which is in my nature. And so for that, I had gone to school and studied philosophy, because there's a lot of reasoning and argumentation, a lot of writing, a lot of research you had to do. And I thought that would be a good basis for law. Of course, by the time I graduated college, I was broke. And, you know, the idea of going to college or, you know, more schooling right away was just kind of outside my reach. And, you know, I was under pressure because, and my father hates that I tell this story, but every morning after I graduated, I'd go and get the newspaper before we had the internet, right? That's how long ago this was. And I would look through the help wanted ads, trying to find something I could do with the schooling that I did have. And he'd walk through the kitchen and go, is anybody hiring any philosophers today? And I would just kind of put my head down and like, you know, every day that little joke that never got any funnier. But it did inspire me to look for something, and I decided that I would try opportunity in sales. And what I learned, even though my first job was far from, the ideal position, was that I liked it. I liked the freedom. I liked being involved in meeting people. I liked the competitive nature of it. And then over time, that led me to want to go and work with people and help them succeed as a sales leader. So it was a bit of a path traveled from individual contributor to um, a sales leader, and because they're very, very different roles.
So that would be a pivotal moment that defined your journey as a sales leader, I would think.
It was. I was very fortunate that I got to work for a couple of people who were very much interested in helping me become the best version of myself when I was younger. And the advice that I give to people today that are looking for new opportunities is be more aware of the individual who's going to be your manager or supervisor than the company. I know that sometimes we have these great ideas about working for a big company because it's got a great reputation. But if the supervisor or the manager or leader isn't going to take an interest in you and in your development, you'd be far better off working for a smaller, maybe less impressive company that had a better leader who was going to take the time and help you become the best version of yourself possible. And I was very fortunate. I worked for two managers over the course of maybe um, I don't know, before I went into sales management, I don't know, 5, 7 years. And they had taken an interest in me and understood that as much as I liked selling, that I did have some talents and maybe I should have gone to be a teacher instead of sales. That would have been a fallback position. Um, but I enjoyed working with other people and helping other people succeed. So they were able to help fuel that interest and eventually helped me migrate into another kind of role. They were also the types of people that when I screwed up, they called me out and gave me a swift kick, and that's
Like
also
you,
very important. What's that?
like you did to me.
I think if we do it with the right intentions, it can be powerful. I have a kind of a funny story about coaching about this, if I could
Yeah,
share it with you.
please. Yeah.
So I, for many years, coached youth sports, and I had written a separate book about my experiences there. It's called "Hey Coach, I Gotta Pee," and because every time you're getting ready to do something, somebody would walk up and say they had to use the bathroom and just throw the whole thing off kilter. But anyway, I had this one young man when I was coaching middle school football. He was a very nice kid, and the only challenge was that here and there he would not listen. And not only did it impact his performance and how he could really be a very good player, but it hurt the team. And I tried many different ways to get his attention, and it really wasn't working. So one day after practice, I saw him with his mother, and I walked up to his mother and reintroduced myself and spoke to her for a moment. And I said, your son could be a much better player, but he tends to lose focus. If it's all right with you, and I know this is going to be a little bit outside what you might expect, but if you could allow me or grant me permission to give him a kick anytime he doesn't listen, I think that this might be helpful. And I took a real risk there because you could get somebody who goes, "What do you mean you want to, commit child abuse?" But I could tell by the look in her eye that she knew why I was doing this. And she looked at her son and said, "Well, coach, you're the coach. And if you think that," now at the same time, this kid is shaking his head like this, right? I mean, I thought his head was going to spin off his neck. But she goes, "If you think this would really help and this will make him a better person, then you have my permission."
Hmm.
And I thought that this kid was going to fall over and pass out. So the next day, when everybody shows up to practice, the story had gotten around, and the kids were saying, "Coach Vinny, don't play. If you're not good, he'll give you a swift kick." But anyway, the young man went on to be a very good player for us and for himself, and I never had to kick him. But if I did walk anywhere that looked like I might be behind him, he perked right up and paid attention. So point taken. So we all need a little bit of that, I guess, is what I'm saying. Particularly when it's done to be instructive and helpful, and not to hurt or harm.
Mhm. And you were very good at that. We would
Thank-
meet quarterly actually the tabletop down on
That's right.
Keith,
Yeah.
and I would tell you what I was doing, and you would talk to me and go, "Okay, that sounds good. That sounds good. We could do this." And it was more relaxed, and I felt like I had a friend. And I would go, "Okay." And I have, things you might not talk about all the time. You go, "Well, I have this obstacle, or I really screwed up with this customer, and I or this one went really well, and wow, and you're not going to believe it. And guess what? They're still my customer." So that was pretty good, like 2.5 decades ago.
Well, it was a while ago. One of the things that I've done some posts about this, and I've spoken about this in other venues, is mentor. Having a mentor and being a mentor. And I
Yes.
often meet with people who haven't really experienced mentorship, and they think that it's a one-way street. In other words, if you're the mentor, you're giving, and the mentee is benefiting. And what I've tried to explain to people as best I can is that if the relationship is really set up well, you as a mentor will gain just as much from the experience as the mentee. You're going to just gain a different perspective. You're going to develop yourself differently, but you're both going to benefit. It's a very important type of relationship, and people should have different mentors as they go through life, as appropriate to their particular needs. Some are more work related, some might be more personal related, um, but there's certainly an opportunity not only to be a mentee and learn from somebody else, but also to be a mentor and impart some knowledge, and actually just give somebody an opportunity to work with someone who's thinking about their best interest, and help them through some thinking about things and challenges.
And since then, I've never been without a mentor. And I went through different ones for different levels, for different skill sets, and almost all of them have been on my podcast. So if you're thinking about doing a podcast, think of your old mentors and go, "Hey, check them out what they're doing now," because Vince and I are kind of doing the same thing, but not really.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Which
a great advice.
I was just going to say, what motivated you to write the book, A Daily Dose of Sales Wisdom? Because we were talking about me writing a book back in the day.
It's interesting. So I have to be frank. My motivation was very selfish. I had always wanted to write a book, and I felt as if it was something that I could do and I should do, but I never got around to it. So for the first time in my entire life, I um, decided to do a New Year's resolution. And my New Year's resolution was to write a book. And I went to the bookstore and I bought a really nice journal, nice spiral journal and a nice pen. And I made a commitment to myself that I would write in that journal for 15 minutes every day. And I actually stuck with it. And I wrote down all these ideas and stories. And eventually I got to the point where I was taking them and like organizing them. And next thing you know, I started to get a manuscript together. And I was very fortunate to find someone to help me edit and self-publish the book in Canada, Marsha Luke, and she was able to help me bring it all together and make it better by asking me questions and helping me clean up certain sections. And next thing you know, I got a book.
It's
So
exciting, guys. You got to get a book. Wait until you open your first box of books.
it is really cool. There's I think it's God, I can't remember. There's an author who said, when you talk about getting your first book, and he had probably had like a 7 or 8 year old son, and he goes, "Wow, this is cool." He took a picture and had posted it about, there's his book, and his son, um, is sitting there reading the book, and
Oh,
two different creations, so to speak, coming together, right? The child and the book. And
Very
so
cool.
it is a lot like you know, bringing something to fruition, but it's a great experience. And I told myself at the time, even if I was the only one that read it, at least I know that I carried through on one commitment and got the experience of putting my ideas down, um, for anybody who wanted to enjoy it.
And that always helps you, the discipline of writing a book and what you go through. Dan Altmeyer knows about that. He recently came out with his book, and he just put up, when you are a mentor, you grow as you work with your protege. Exactly. Exactly.
100%.
And we're still friends. I'm still friends with all my mentors, and that's how Vince is here. And hi, Alex, a shout out to you. Um, so we were talking about new people. There's Alex saying hi, Vince. What are some of the challenges people have hiring now? Because it's a whole different ball of wax.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a good question. I work in my current capacity in consulting with different companies. Part of it is about talent acquisition, trying to find the best people um, to join your team. And I really try to help them focus on just two things. I know there's a lot of things and you can debate this, but the two things that have always served me well is the person somebody who's a cultural fit? In other words, do you want them as part of your culture, part of your environment, part of your team? And the second thing is, are they smart? But by smart, I don't really mean like book smart, but have a capacity to learn and a willingness to learn. And I think if you can find someone who is both a good cultural fit, who will add to the culture in a positive way, not detract from it, and who's smart, who's willing to learn, who's willing to contribute and share ideas, that's pretty much a good step towards finding an ideal employee for your organization, an ideal team member. Today, it's very much a challenge to find the best talent because a lot of people are much more picky about where they're working. I have found that there is a huge emphasis on understanding how you will help them grow as a person. I just did an interview yesterday for somebody, and I always ask, why don't you tell me a little bit about what you're looking for in your next opportunity? Very, open ended question. And they almost always respond with, I'm looking to go somewhere where I can grow, where I can develop myself, I can advance my professional career. And I think it's a great opportunity for small and mid-sized companies to stand out from larger companies by offering programs and having frontline leaders who are committed to doing that and speaking to that, and trying to show people that you are committed to their development and that you'd be willing to make an investment in them so long as they're willing to make an investment in themselves.
So perfect. And then you can flourish and both win. It's a win-win.
100%. I think when you find that people are working somewhere where they feel fulfilled and that they see themselves growing and that there's people interested in their success, that they work harder, and that they'll want to stay there longer. Right now, it's very hard for us to understand. Like when I was coming into the job market, it wasn't uncommon for people to have a couple of jobs and then go to work for somewhere for 30 years. I mean, that was very common. If you look today at some of the statistics, people who are coming into the workforce today will work for more than 12 or 15 different companies in their career. They're not even different roles in the same company. I'm talking about different organizations entirely. It's a much different marketplace, and the world is becoming smaller, particularly with people being able to find other ways to do work. Right? You don't always have to be present to do work. So I think it's really important for people to understand that we're all competing for this talent, and if you want the best talent, you have to behave in such a way that inspires people. Nobody wants to be managed, but people like to be led and inspired. And I tried to explain this. There was a young man who was working for me who now is the chief operating officer at a company. out west, and I was trying to impart upon him this idea. And I said, listen, a manager or boss is somebody you can tell somebody else to run into the wall, and then they have to do that. I said, but if you're a good leader, people will be inspired to run through the wall to help you and
Good
to
one.
do well. And that's something I ask people to keep in mind. Are you sending people charging into a wall, or are they going to run through it to achieve some higher level of performance?
That's a beautiful analogy. I like that one.
Thank you.
So how can these smaller companies get that top tier talent?
Well, I think it all starts with how they advertise their jobs and they conduct interviews, and putting a focus on professional development and letting people know that they're looking for people who are going to be a good fit and who are willing to learn. And if you're willing to put forth the effort, that the company will make an equal investment in helping you. And it's not a guaranteed recipe, because we live in such evolving times. But I think it's something that often goes, and it's often overlooked.
Hmm.
I worked with a few different companies where they're telling me they're looking to hire people, and I laugh because I'll ask them, "Well, what are you looking for?" And they're like, "Well, we're looking for a pit bull. This is what we want, and we want someone to go out and do this, that, and the other thing." And I'll read the job description, and it looks like they're looking for a hamster. And I'll come back and go, "You're advertising for a hamster, but you told me you want a pit bull. No wonder you're disappointed with all the people that are coming through the door." I said, "Be bold. Put what you want, and give people the opportunity. And by the way, make sure you don't put things in there that are going to scare off people who might be talented, that you don't really care about." So, from a sales perspective, if you're looking for a sales professional, someone who's proactive to go out and sell, does that person have to have a college degree to be successful?
Not necessarily. No.
No. But I'll tell you what, I bet you if you look at job postings for sales professionals, they'll almost always say college degree required. And that's because somebody in human resources wrote the job description and not the hiring manager or the hiring leader. And that's another thing that I encourage them to do, is you have to push back on your HR department and say, no, that doesn't necessarily make someone successful. I mean, it's a great tool, right? And you can certainly learn things, but that's not a guarantee to success. I'd rather have somebody who didn't even graduate high school, who wants to go out and do the things that need to be done, and is willing to be a good member of the team. That person I could make into an ultra high performer, as compared to someone who maybe went to college and doesn't want to apply themselves, right? And doesn't want to make the effort.
We have a few people saying hi. Frank Miles, long time no see.
Hey,
And
Frank.
yeah, nice to see you here. Thanks for joining us. And our LinkedIn user from Boston, who has to put their name in, saying hi, Vince. So it must be someone you know.
Yes, that's
And
great.
yes, and you can share this out. Everyone, share it out. Let's get more friends over. So, how can smaller companies ensure that they hire sales professionals that can achieve success? And there's Susie. Hi, Susie McIntyre. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Um, I think one of the things is to be honest about what you're looking for, and to be honest about the opportunity. I have seen a lot of, in talking to people who are looking for an opportunity, tell me that companies sometimes exaggerate the potential or how easy something is going to be. And I don't think people really want that. I know it's easy, but I think they'd rather hear the truth and understand that something is going to be a challenge. But as important it is to have a challenge, is to have somebody by your side while you're going through that challenge. To be um, that person in your corner supporting you, um, as you're learning the business, you're learning the industry, and you're going out, making your own way in the world. And I think that a lot of companies could set themselves apart in the eyes of top talent by being honest, being forthcoming about what the opportunity is, the work that's going to be involved, and what you're going to need to be successful. And at the same time, demonstrate to that person that you have a plan to get them on board and get them up to speed, fairly quickly is
Mhm.
also important, because I see too many people hire individuals and they have no onboarding plan. They
Right.
basically just tell them to come in on Monday. They get a laptop. They meet some people. There's no plan.
Mhm.
I When I work with companies, we develop at least a 30-day plan to ensure that they're going to get the fundamentals, and that's just the start. But at least 30 days where every day has been articulated in a written plan. And I think that also helps people understand that you're taking them coming to work there seriously.
What do you believe is the most important quality in a successful sales leader?
That's another good question. So I think there are a lot of qualities. Think I think beyond having a solid character is having an interest in others. There was a book that I once read that was talking about sales managers and sales leaders, and among the rules, and you might find this funny, it said that sales managers should never covet the commissions of their sales professionals. And a lot of times, um, if you're doing a very good job or doing a good job as a sales leader, your sales professionals should be making more money than you. But a lot of people struggle with the ego on that they're
Mhm.
the manager and they're not making as much money as the people that work for them. And what they're really missing here is that these are different types of roles, different types of jobs, different types of responsibilities, and that it's not necessarily a competition um, on the financial side. Um, so I would encourage and I would look for people who are willing to put the interests of their team ahead of their own interests. And I think what you'll find in return is that when you cultivate a culture and a team environment like that, you will find that the people who are working with you will have a tremendous amount of loyalty and they'll work hard on your behalf and they'll have your back. And I think that's a great situation where everybody's keeping an eye out for each other.
And it builds a nicer environment so that you want to go to work and hang out and be have open discussions and say, "Hey," and you want to get better. Uh,
100%.
your
Yeah.
LinkedIn user is Carlos from Olympia. Hello, Carlos. Thank you for joining us and share this out. Here's a good question from maybe Carlos or another LinkedIn user. Is it possible to become a great salesperson if you're an introvert? How would you
Yes.
answer that, Vince?
Absolutely. If you want to read about introverts, um, take a look at Matthew Pollard. He's written a lot about introverts and their success. Um, to a certain degree, I am an introvert, which I
I would.
know seems funny to be on this show, but I really am. And the difference is that introverts don't necessarily want to be the center of attention. But what they found is that a lot of sales professionals who have introvert qualities actually are better listeners, because extroverts like to be the center of attention, the life of the party. And not to say that they can't be successful either, but sometimes some of their assets work against them. Whereas sales professionals who are a little bit more introverted tend to think of others a little bit more, tend to listen, have more empathy, will allow other people to be in the spotlight rather than feeling that they need to be in the spotlight. And I think it also lends itself to being a better sales leader. When you will allow others to be in the spotlight rather than yourself. So I would say yes. If you're an introvert or you know an introvert, obviously there's obvious great opportunities in professional sales.
And listening. Actually, if you go to Cynthia's Songs of the Sea, I posted something today from Ernest Hemingway. Think about that. Ernest Hemingway wrote about listening way back in his day, and we really need it now.
What'd you say? No, I'm kidding.
Exactly. Exactly. A shout out to Kevin. Hi, Kevin. I hope your wife is doing well. And Dan says, if your salespeople are not making enough money, you won't be a manager for long.
That's true. That is absolutely true, right? And I'll tell you what. I think that when you're looking at how people can the income aspect of it, um, for salespeople is often the motivation to do all the things that you need to do to be successful. I have a funny little story though about when I was a sales leader and there was a change in compensation plans. And I'm a firm believer that compensation plans should motivate and inspire. Most of the time, they do the complete opposite, and it can be disheartening. But if I could, I'd like to share this story. And it was
Yes, guys.
when I was at a Rico, and Rico sells office equipment and big copiers, and I was managing a, um, a strategic account, major account team. But Rico also sold these little printers. They were like, a couple $1,000s each, compared to some of the $50,000 or $100,000 machines that my team was used to selling. So they came out with this change in compensation that said you had to sell 2 printers a quarter, or you wouldn't maximize your quarterly bonus. And I read this and I shook my head because it was clearly done by somebody, who wasn't looking to inspire, who was looking to punish, not a carrot, but a stick. And everybody on my sales team at the time, I think there was about 7 or 8 people, they were totally frustrated. I mean, you could hear it in the language, you could hear it in their tone and how angry and how they were going to, make less money and be miserable and the whole thing. And so I had a team meeting and I brought them all together, and I started to chuckle, and they didn't like that. And I said, it's funny. I said, you guys are complaining about selling 2 printers a quarter. And I said, it's pretty funny. And they said, yeah, well, when we're selling these other things, who has time for that? And it's whatever. And they said, well, why? What do you think? And I said, I don't know why we would bother selling them when we can give them away for free.
Right.
People said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, we're selling these, $100,000 machines. I said, how hard would it be to roll in a printer and give it to the client for free for use somewhere else in their organization? Or how hard would it be if you're selling a fleet of 20 machines to include a couple of printers for free? And they all did like a mental click, and they all went on to hit all their bonuses. And everybody, I don't know if we shared this or not initially, but people started to go, why is it that they're happy at bonus time? And I think it eventually trickled out. And it's not something you want to keep a secret. We weren't doing that to be punitive, but it was interesting that just a change in mindset, what it can allow you to do, and for us to get over this hump. And actually, what we found, which was really interesting, was that by giving away these printers, a lot of the clients really liked them. And then they started calling up and wanted to order them. So, again, we're calling on larger companies who could do that. Now, all of a sudden, we were selling them by just taking orders rather than, having it to be work. So the strategy really came into play and really worked well for not only for me, but for the team.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. So, how do you approach executive coaching for leaders at different experience levels?
Well, that's a good question too. That's a harder one.
Mhm. What did you say?
Yeah. Well, let me put it this way. I've done some executive coaching now that I'm doing this as my career, right, as part of what I do.
Mhm.
And The one thing that I spend time working on is trying to understand really what the person is looking for to be able to be helpful. Um, and there's an interesting little tidbit story that I have that might help illustrate this. They did a survey of high school principals, and they asked them for different skills that somebody graduating high school should have. And a huge number of them said, well, they have to have problem solving skills. They have to be good problem solvers. Then they went and they asked CEOs of companies for, what types of skills do you want in people who are graduating school that might come to work for you? And they almost universally said, we want them to have good problem identification skills.
Mm.
They said there's nothing worse than someone who solves the wrong problem. So I've taken that to heart. I spend a great deal of time before I will actually work with somebody or for somebody in any type of consulting role, unless I've gone and done an in-depth discovery to really understand what their challenges are. Oftentimes, people will come to you and they'll tell you their symptoms, right? They'll tell you I have a headache, or my mouth is dry, or my finger hurts, or whatever it is. And yes, the problem may be associated to something immediately there, or this may simply be the byproduct of a different problem. And I think it's very important that we spend as much time understanding the problem and how that's impacting the situation before we roll out a solution. And I think by doing that, we do everybody a greater service by really being helpful and not just putting band-aids on things that will never really amount to anything.
As I say, getting to the root of the problem.
Yep, getting to the root of the problem, getting to the root of the right problem. The Heath brothers have written some interesting books, and they talk about, another one of these stories where oftentimes people become very, very good about addressing a problem without ever solving the problem. And the example they give is there was a man who lived by this river, and one day he noticed that there was a young kid floating down the river. And he jumped in and rescued the kid and brought him to the shore. And the next day, the same thing happened. He was out looking at something, and there was another kid. And he started to get much more sophisticated in his approach to rescue the kids. And he was getting very good. And he rescued a kid almost every day for like 3 weeks. And a friend of his came over one day and was talking with him and saw him do this. And he said, look how proficient I am at rescuing these kids. It takes almost no effort at all. I'm so good at it. And his friend said, yeah, why don't we do this? Why don't we take a walk upriver and see who's throwing them in? Because that's really the problem. So I know it's a little bit of a silly, but he does a good job in his book illustrating this. And sometimes organizations become so good at overcoming problems that they forget that maybe they're creating the problem in the first place. And I think we do that as individuals as well, right? We compensate where we don't need to compensate if we just simply address the root issue, right? The root item. So it's very important that people be honest with themselves about addressing some of these things, whether it's an individual level or at the business or team level.
And ladies and gentlemen, this works not only in business, but in your own personal life.
100%.
What common challenges do you see teams face, and how do you help them overcome them besides seeing who's throwing the children off the bridge?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think one of the challenges that teams face is there's a gap between what you say and what you do. And again, there's some other writers who are much more eloquent, but there's what you say and there's what you tolerate. And what I think people have to understand is what you tolerate becomes the standard or the norm. For example, you might say that you expect a certain level of behavior from your team. But if you have to be on time for meetings, whether they're in person or virtual, you expect everybody to be on time. Yet there'll be people, and there'll be sales leaders or leaders of any type, that will allow people to come in late and not address it at all, whether it's in public or in private. Um, I had a tendency that when I was having in-person meetings, when I was at a company, the last company I was with, is that when if the meeting started at 8 o'clock, I expected everybody to be in there setting up by 5 to 8, and at 8 o'clock I shut and locked the door. Then anybody who was late couldn't sneak in. Not that you could sneak in anyway, but now I had to make a commotion because the door was locked. And then you'd find some people knocking on the door and everybody else being a little, frustrated somebody was coming in late. Now I totally understand there's legitimate reasons why someone might come to work late, and I never want to punish anybody for that. But I would always ask, if you're not going to be on time, then let me know. And so at 8 o'clock, if I don't get a text from you saying, I had to get my child off to school, or I had a challenge or whatever, then I assume that that you should be there. And it was a pretty effective tool to help, because now you get the whole team going. Now you're not just disrupting me, but you're being disrespectful to your teammates. And often, they're not going to tolerate that either. And I think that we have to be really careful in what we say to make sure that we're willing to go to the mats over. Are we willing to let people know that when they behave outside those norms, um, that it's not acceptable? And there's different ways to address that. Oftentimes you want to reprimand in private, but you certainly want to make sure that what you're saying um, and what you're doing, those things are consistent. Because believe it or not, when you're in any type of leadership role, you're always on stage. People are watching you. And if they see that you let the top performer get away with doing whatever, or somebody on the team, because you happen to be more friendly with them, you go to lunch with them a little bit more often, then what they're going to say is that you don't really stand for anything, and your credibility is shot. And I don't think you can be an effective leader when people don't trust and believe what you're saying.
If you get that, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you share that out. This is gold, just gold. And think outside the box. Look at Vince is always finding new and interesting ways to take care of his work family. And it makes it fun because you're not going to be late. You're going to make sure you're probably like elbowing him and to get in there first.
Well, and I think it's important to balance that, with this idea. I know that we're focusing on one part, like being late, but the other thing that I am a big believer in is that people's individual families come first. And so what I would tell people is that if you have a situation where somebody is at home and they're not feeling well, or you have a situation that it's the first day of school, not only will I make sure to work to not schedule a meeting that day so I don't impact people unintentionally, but if if it is the first day of school, or your child's in a school play, then I don't expect you to be in the office. I expect you to be there. And I spoke to quite a few people. I was on a podcast some time ago where this topic came up, and I brought it to people's attention. And the nice thing was that I got feedback from my team members that they believe that to be true, because I always said I would cover for them. I'll even go out and do your appointment, cover a client emergency, so that you don't miss something with your family, because those things come and go. And I can tell you now, I can remember when my son was 5, and he waited at the door to see me to come home, and now he's he's off living his own life, and he's 28, and he has his own like 3-year-old. So what seems like it'll be there forever, and this, right, with your son, what you think is going to be an eternity is really just very quickly. So take advantage of that time, and make sure that you're working for people who respect that, because it's important.
It's so important. Don't you all want to work for Vince Burruano? I mean, seriously. Yes, I had the pleasure of doing that. How do you encourage continuous learning and growth within your sales teams?
Wow, that's an interesting one too. So I tend to think continuous learning is important. I know there's a lot of people who think of sales, and that's my perspective, having been in professional selling as a job. I always said it's a profession. It's very much like being an architect or an engineer or a lawyer or a doctor. All those other professions have an expectation that they have to keep current with the latest in technology, the latest innovations, the latest information about what it is they do. And I think that's very true in sales. And I was once given a great compliment by Fred Diamond, who's a co-founder of the Institute for Excellence in Sales. And he said, I knew things were different with you when I came to your office and there were bookcases that actually had books on them. And subsequently, I saw that you were buying books and giving them out to your team, and that your team was actually reading them. And I will tell you that I've been fortunate to have several national best-selling authors actually attend for a whole hour a sales meeting, a virtual sales meeting, because I sent them a LinkedIn note. I asked to connect with them, and I mentioned to them that I had given a book out, and to my entire team. I had read it myself and then bought, whatever, 10 or 15 copies, and had my team read it. And I've had several authors write back to me and say, that's wonderful. Let me know the next time you have a meeting and I'll jump on. And both of them jumped on for an hour, and they shared their wisdom. And these are people who are charging, to give a speech, $5,000-$10,000 for an hour, right? To go and be a keynote speaker. And they're on with my team, and my team is practicing what they learned. They're prepared and ready to go. And it was some of the best team events we had, because first of all, I could sit there and learn something as well. Like, I wasn't having to worry about, being the presenter. And then you actually have these other individuals there, and it was really exciting. So I would encourage people to think that way. Reach out to some of these people and connect with them. I think you'd be surprised how willing they are to build their network, just like you're willing to build your network.
And this is a trickle down effect that goes not only to the whole corporation, but to each family. Each of those people are doing that with their children. Think about it. Or hopefully they are, because it's brilliant.
It is.
Brilliant. So in your opinion, how has the sales industry evolved over the past 35 years?
Oh my God, how has it evolved over the last 35 years? I think that there's a lot of things that have changed. When I was first in sales, sales administrators used word processors or typewriters to help you put together your recommendations to present. We had CRM, but they were on sheets of paper and binders, right, with business cards stapled to the top. Everything. We didn't have cell phones. We had pagers, and you get a page from the office with 911, and you would try to find a payphone even in the pouring rain that was working, so that you could call the office because it was some type of non-emergency emergency. I think all these things have changed and made things very, very different, but in a positive way. But I'll tell you, there's one thing that hasn't changed, and it's the ultimate secret to sales success. I don't know if I should share this because that might be too much information.
It's pretty helpful, right?
Well, so the secret to sales success is there's no secret. It disappoints so many people, because if you think about it, with all the books that have been written and the podcasts and the videos and the seminars, every piece of great sales knowledge that I'm aware of is known. It's out there.
You're just not doing it.
Huh?
You're just not doing it.
That's the bottom line. The difference between the average person or somebody who's squeaking by and the ultra high performer is that the person who is an ultra high performer is doing all the little things that everybody else refuses to do. And I know it's hard, because sales professionals are the biggest, can be uh, people most likely to cut a corner. If I told the sales professionals I have 5-step process to you making every sale, they'd all try to do it in 4. It's just their nature. And if I told them I had a 4-step process, they'd all try to do it in 3. I get it. But don't ever exchange efficiency for effectiveness. Always be effective first, and then be efficient in how you go about it. And I think that this is the one thing that hasn't changed. And I still think it's a great opportunity for people in this profession is to do all those little things, send thank you notes, express gratitude, do right by people, put your client's interests first, um, tell people when you don't have the answer, when you don't know, all these types of things, and make sure that you're using, whether it's a CRM system or something else. Don't rely on your memory. Use the tools that can help you be more successful, and I guarantee you'll you'll eventually um, make more money than what you're making today, and you'll also have a greater sense of accomplishment. And those things are very, very important.
And it's way more fun when you win everything and you go on the trips and you make new friends. And Thomas Ellis joined us. Hello.
Hey, Thomas, my
Talking
friend.
about another sales professional.
Absolutely, sales coach.
Yes.
Thomas is wonderful.
He's
He's
terrific.
great.
He's been on my podcast before and we love him. Let's talk about how you earned your MBA from George Washington University and your impact on that on your career trajectory.
Well,
That's a pretty
it's
big deal. And you did that while you were working. Yes.
I did, and what's interesting is that at one point I was working full time. I was getting my MBA, and a lot of people don't know this, but when I was growing up, I was a volunteer first responder, and I had done it for many, many years in New York. Um, and when I moved to Virginia, there really wasn't a venue for it. But after 9/11, um, I felt compelled to do something to give back. So I went back and volunteered as a EMT firefighter. And so at one point, I was actually working full time, going to graduate school, and getting my firefighter certification. My schedule, my wife, I'm surprised she didn't divorce me. My work schedule was, every day, 7 to 5. Mondays and Wednesdays, I went to graduate school till about 9 o'clock at night. And Tuesdays and Thursdays from 6 to 11, I went to the fire academy, and then all day Saturday and Sunday. So I had one reprieve, which was on Friday nights, and that went on for about 6 months. It was one of the hardest things I ever did, but it also showed me I could get things done. My getting my degree was important to me because I did not have a foundation of business as an undergraduate. I didn't have that opportunity, or I didn't make the effort to educate myself in that way. And I really felt it was important, if I wanted to continue my career as a business professional, not just a sales professional, that I should understand the language of how organizations work, how they think, and how they make decisions. And um, it really hit me while I was working on my degree. I was at a meeting for a very large opportunity, and in attendance was the chief financial officer for this organization. And he was talking about certain things, and I was responding and, kind of thinking through this investment with him. And at the end, he said, it's nice to talk to somebody in your capacity who actually really understands this and who isn't just, and I'm not saying that because I was particularly smart, but it was because I got educated about it. Because we often, throw around terms, financial terms or business terms that we really don't understand, or we don't understand how they impact other parts of the business. But I tell you this, people who know those things know whether you're faking or you really understand. And they have much more respect for those people that really understand.
Plus, your level of confidence goes through the sky,
100%.
up in the
100%.
stratosphere, because you can go in and you have the confidence to own the room and you just are quiet and they know. because
That's
you
right.
always know.
Well, I have a funny story about that too, about doing your homework and being prepared for, um, a meeting. And it doesn't require that you have an advanced degree or any degree, but it does require that you do research. And so when I was at my previous company, we were going in to meet with a very, very large client and their agent. And this at the time I was selling moving services. So, but this company had a national footprint, and we wanted to get their contract to do all of their relocation work nationally. And we went in and we had prepared for the meeting. We were getting interviewed, and we started to ask some questions about, the total square footage, impact on employees, and sharing with them some thoughts that we had. And finally, the real estate management company who represents this very large client
Mhm.
said, "Have you been talking to someone? Have you been getting this inside information? How do you have all this information?" And I said, "Well, your client is a publicly traded company. So we simply went to the SEC.gov and read their annual reports and their financial statements.
Mhm.
And you would have thought their jaws, you could hear their jaws hitting the table, because you don't tend to think of movers as people who can read and write to start with. And here we were, we had gone and done this level of research where we could ask some really powerful questions about information that they had posted for anybody to see, but nobody else had done that. And we ended up winning that contract and had it for many years, and did all their work nationally. And it was all because we made the point of doing our homework so that we were properly prepared for that moment where we could differentiate ourselves.
Brilliant. And if you want more of this wisdom, pick up a daily dose of sales wisdom. And Vince has a prize actually for the person who joined first and the person who does the first replay.
Correct.
And
Yep.
he will sign a book. He will autograph a daily dose of sales wisdom to you. Free signed copy of Practical Sales Wisdom book to the first person who comments. In your replay as well, we already have our winner for today.
Yes. So make sure you get that the name and address and everything for me, and I will sign and mail a copy of the book out to that person.
Okay, so that would be Jake. Jake, please put in your address and phone number into the chat so that we can get you your book signed from Vince Burruano. What's the one thing you hope listeners will take away from this conversation?
Well, I really want to thank you again for the opportunity to be on your show. I'm glad to see that a number of people have joined who I know. Thank you for making the time. It's important to me. Hopefully, you took away at least one nugget from this. But I would encourage you to be open to learning from as many sources as possible. There's a lot of great um, people out there with information not only on sales, but on leadership, and avail yourself to all that information so that you can be the best version of yourself possible.
And just keep growing and reading. Um, Vince has other books too. What's that new sales professional playbook? What's one piece of advice you would give from that?
That's a I think that's a great book if you have somebody who's completely new to sales, and maybe they're working for a smaller company. They don't have, like, full blown sales training program. It's for new people about how to enter sales. It's got examples of emails and scripts and role play and documents. And on my website, you can go and access all of those documents for free. So there's QR codes in the book, and when you get to a section and you want to get a copy of that form for your own use, you can just go ahead, go to the website, or scan the QR code. It'll bring you right to it. And please make use of that information and build a career in sales.
And when you have your team meetings and you buy them all the Daily Dose of Sales Wisdom or one of the other books, reach out to Vince because I bet he might come on the Zoom call with you and help your employees get even better to make your family stronger so you can do your job even better. He is a kind-hearted, he's a hard-working, he's got great insights, and he's a good person. You don't get all of that in a manager all the time. So we thank you, and I thank you for being in my life. Share this out. We'll catch you next Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Cynthia Manion Show. Love you all. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.